assessment to tighten up your home. And you can take a visual inventory of potential problem areas, and you can also note actual air movement on your own. And what we suggest here at the Michigan SHPO is you can take a lit incense stick or even a match and walk around your home, and you can go around your windows and any kind of penetrations to see if that match blows out or the incense stick, the smoke goes one way, to see if air is coming into your home. That's kind of just a do-it-yourself technique. So here's kind of the numbers. So when we look at a home, a lot of people first say that my windows need to be replaced. Well, that's not always the case. The major loss of energy is coming out of your walls. So when we first talk about weatherization, we'd like to address the walls and the level of insulation. Do you have any? Do you have existing that maybe has settled over time? How do we address where we're having heat loss? And then only 15% is through the floor. Okay, so when we look at houses and when we from the State Historic Preservation Office point of view, we look at, okay, where was it originally to where is it now? What transitions, what character-defining features have changed over time? So often people built homes generations ago considering the climate, the environment, whether it was a northern climate and they used the shutters as to keep the cold air and the cold and the snow out, or maybe it was a summer climate, a hotter climate, a southern climate, where they actually used the shutters, they closed them on the house in order to keep the sun and the heat out. You know, shutters served more than an aesthetic, but it served an actual utilitarian functional purpose. So here we're seeing where you see where there has been some changes. The turret is removed. They've added new ventilation along the ridge line of the roof. They've closed windows in the gable where that could have been used as ventilation purposes. So it's been changed. So that gives us a sense of where was it then and how did they build the house? Was it a functional piece? Did it have embodied energy already? And then where is it now? And how can we make it more sustainable in the future? So let's kind of get down to it. Let's talk about windows. So here's an image of a building, a commercial building, where the windows have been, this is a very, I know this is an extreme window replacement image, but this is, you know, this does happen, and we often replace our windows because there's a myth that new is better and that we should replace when we believe that old windows have fulfilled their livelihood. But however, that's not the case. So what we need to do is really take a look at what was there originally and where we're going forward. So here we have two images, and on the left are our wood window rehab specialists rehabbing a wood window, and then on the right you can see where the window fenestration has been changed in this building. So what they've done is they've replaced the windows, they've made the sashes smaller, and then they've boxed it up with wood. Well, that does two things. You know, the windows were built specifically for this building, so you've negated that original feature. Also, the daylighting. When you box up a window, you lose that daylighting where you might not have to have a light on inside. As I talk about these different energy and weatherization measures, there's a lot of things that's kind of like a patchwork quilt where all of them are related to make this house more energy efficient. All the patchwork of the quilt comes together to make the entire quilt. So when I talk about windows, on the left we have a vinyl window, and on the right we have a wood window. And as far as that goes, the vinyl, which often, you know, there's window replacement companies that have mass marketing and advertising for vinyl windows, but when you really look at it, vinyl is hollow on the inside. They're not sustainable in the long run. They fail within 10 to 15 years. And in fact, I review a lot of weatherization projects funded from the Department of Energy up here in Michigan, and I've even had contractors call me installing a window, and then 12 months later that window has failed in that historic house. And it was not always because of the window, it was because of the way it was installed. So sometimes it can be a matter of installation, but however, On the right, a wood window, which is inherently more sustainable. It was built for the home. It lasted 100 years. It can last 100 more. If you have someone that is knowledgeable in wood window rehab, they can go to their local hardware store and get the tools that they need to rehab that wood window, whether it be glazing points, caulk, some scrapers to get paint off. And also, let's talk about the components of the wood window. Unlike vinyl that's hollow, you have wood is like a honeycomb, and it's an insulator, an insulating material on its own. And also, that honeycomb traps air within it, so it doesn't allow for the air to pass through, unlike where a vinyl window heats up and is very cold. So you need to consider about the payback and the return on the investment on vinyl windows. Not all windows can be rehabilitated, but what we recommend at the SHPO is to replace in kind, something similar proportion, size, and material. And there really isn't a guarantee or warranty on vinyl windows. You know they have to be replaced. And they often do deteriorate from effects of the sun. So we recommend repainting and removing the old paint, weather stripping, caulking open joints, replacing glazing, making certain that your sash locks work, and storm windows. I can't recommend storm windows enough because you can have exterior storms and interior. They in themselves act as a defense against weather before having, and when you pair a wood window with storms, it's either just as energy efficient or more energy efficient than a vinyl window in a storm. And I'll take that argument to the bank because we've done a lot of different testing on windows here in Michigan. So let's kind of move on, and we're going to talk about exterior activities that you can conduct on your own. And a lot of the things I'm talking about today are low cost, middle of the road expenses that you may not have to hire someone, that you can actually take on your own. So here we are on the exterior of a house, and we're looking at some of the joints where two different wood members meet, or where the clapboard siding is meeting, and that there might be some gaps, or that has just been weathered over time. So first, sealing and caulking is very important so that you can keep pests out, vermin out, any kind of weather out, moisture out. Where there's a way, water will find its way. So you can actually, you can remove debris from gutters and downspouts. You want to make sure, and I'm going to get into more of this, where your gutters are sloped properly, downspouts drain water away from the house. And also, you can make certain that you have weather stripping around your doors and entryways. And this is something you can do on your own. And also, back to exterior activities, you want to make certain that you clear vegetation and direct water away. Just for instance, you can make certain that you inspect the grading at your house perimeter to slope water away from the house. When you have any kind of vegetation against your house, and believe me, I love ivy on a house just as much as the next person, but I know what it can do to mortar joints. The ivy can pull, and any other kind of vegetation can pull that mortar out, and then have the brick, the masonry will fail. So where there's vegetation, remember there's moisture against your house. Let's move on to paint. Not a lot of folks consider paint as a barrier for weatherization, but it is. It's more than just an aesthetic feature. It actually serves a weatherizing utilitarian function. So you want to maintain paint on wood and metal. You want to make certain to inspect exterior trim pieces for the paint to be to not be blistering or weathering. Make sure that the wood has a tight fit, there's no dampness or deterioration. So you can see in this image that over time the paint has failed, or there's water, moisture causing that paint to blister. So often people say, Jessica, well, I'd like to clean my building, and I have a lot of clapboard siding that needs to be cleaned. And these are two images that I took of someone that called me and said, I think I might have made the wrong move. I pressure washed my clapboard siding, and now it's damaged. And I said, okay, well, when it comes to washing your house, it's not just the pressure, but it's the distance. So what's the PSI, the pounds per square inch? How hard were you hitting that wood, and how close were you? You should not pressure wash your wood. You can actually clean with water and soap, and you can clean your paint that way. However, so what you can see on this is that it's actually, when they pressure wash, they removed the paint. And remember, that paint is like a barrier of water. So when you remove it, you're exposing it to different elements. Same with masonry. Never, ever want to sandblast a brick. You know, here we refer to the Secretary of the Interior Standards for Rehabilitation, and I call them our Bible, you know, our 10 Commandments that we refer to. And one of them is use the gentlest means possible when you're cleaning a building. You want to make certain that what you're cleaning a building with is softer than the material you're cleaning. So I hope that makes sense. So you don't want to blast a brick with sand. When you do blast it with, when you've gone in, this is the image I took where someone blasted it with sandblast or pressure wash masonry, and it's removed that exterior fire skin on the brick. So, and that's really the protective layer of the brick that was closest to the bottom of the kiln when the brick was fired. So when you've done that, you've removed that, and then that masonry underneath that fire skin is just like sand. It crumbles in your fingers, and you can see where it's been dented. And I'll get into a couple other images. Let me see. Oh, I'm going to jump ahead and go back. But here's the image of a wall I took recently where they had sandblasted, and over time, they had to go and patch the brick masonry. And you can see they patched with Portland cement, which is concrete. And the next image is where they sandblasted as well. And you can see where, and I would just in my fingers, I would touch it and it would just flake like sand. You could pop your index finger right into a brick. So you can see what pressure washing does over time. That brick has essentially spalled off out of the course, and so exposing. And then once your exterior is exposed and is soft like that, it's just going to be a vehicle for further damage. Let me jump back. So another weatherization measure that we often are providing guidance on is repointing. So when you repoint mortar, first, if a building is in need or a home is in need of being repointed, it's mortar repointed, you want to make certain that you do a mortar analysis. You look at what is that existing mortar made of? Is it lime-based? Is it concrete, Portland cement-based? What are the aggregates in that mortar? And if you do in fact repoint with a stronger mortar than is in the original brick, then you're going to have things like what's happening on the left here happen, and that has spalled. They repointed with concrete, which was stronger than the brick, and the brick wasn't able to expand and contract with freezing and thawing cycles. So it essentially popped off, and now the mortar joints are stronger than the brick, which is keeping the building together. And then you can see on the right image what they did was they repointed with concrete as well, and it doesn't match. It's not an appropriate measure that we would recommend. And you know, back in trade school, my professor would tell me, if you are putting new lime mortar into a building that already has existing lime mortar and it's not the same color, this is kind of a trick of the trade, I guess, a tool of the trade. You just get some dirt and you put that in your mortar, and it'll get that patina like the older masonry the mortar has. So just a little tidbit of info there for you. Okay, so I mentioned about insulation, conditioning, the ventilation of windows, those being very important features. Insulation and ventilation together are called conditioning. So when we look at attic insulation, we're going to also look at ventilation being a part of this whole conditioning system. I'm jumping right into insulation now because it's a really hot issue up here in Michigan. And our weather, our climate isn't too much different than Ohio. However, we have the Upper Peninsula that's like another, another part of the world, because it gets extremely cold and very cruel winters and snowfall than we get down here in mid-Michigan or southeastern Michigan where Detroit is. But so insulation in Michigan is a very hot issue. We have to have our homes insulated. So an example here is where these are not appropriate ways of insulation. On the left, we have a few different types of insulation, and this is in the attic. And so what they've done is just blown cellulose. They've laid fiberglass bats on the ground, and on the right, that's some blown cellulose that has settled over time and is in need of being replaced. Earlier when we had started this discussion, we talked about the building envelope, and the most important critical areas for insulation is in your attic. And so what you want to do in attic conditioning, you want to make sure that you have enough insulation and that you're keeping that building envelope insulated. And the attic should actually be the same temperature as outside. And when I first learned that, I thought, oh, I guess that does make sense, because it's constantly moving. It's moving that cold air in and out through gable vents, through attic vents, through roof vents. So here we recommend 18 inches of insulation in your attic, and you can add over existing insulation. You want to make certain that you insulate all your ducts, your exhaust fan, those light switches, things we talked about. Often I get the question, Jessica, can I put insulation over top of existing insulation? And yeah, that's fine. It depends on what's existing. So it's a case-by-case basis. Do you have fiberglass on the floor right now of your attic? Do you have cellulose? We need to talk about what you have. So let's briefly, let me see here, move on to, I thought I had another, there we go, I'm sorry. So here on the left we have hot capping, and that's, I talked to Frank about a week ago, and we were talking about hot capping being a hot button issue up here in Michigan, and I asked if it was in Ohio. But that's essentially where you're changing the very function of your home. You're actually making that attic a conditioned space now, because you're making it the same temperature as your first floor, your second floor, and you're making it a conditioned space. So up here, we don't recommend hot capping, and here's a couple reasons why. Because, so first, on the left is you're using fiberglass bats to hot cap. Well, yeah, that's allowed but not recommended. And hot capping is, let me say, when you put insulation against the roof rafters. On the right, they spray foam hot cap, and that's not appropriate. So for a couple reasons. One is, say for instance your roof has a leak. You can see it from the outside, but you can't see it from the inside because the inside's blocking from the insulation that's been laid. You can't see where it is leaking, and you're having problems. Or say some of your roofing members on the outside, maybe for instance your shingles are starting to curl up. You don't know where the water's coming in. You can't see, you can't address it from the inside. Another reason is spray foam, and we're going to get into a little bit more conversation about that, but spray foam is not reversible. Hot capping, actually, the most energy efficient method of insulating your attic, as in fiberglass bat, is putting the fiberglass down, face down, with the craft face paper up, and actually insulating from the attic floor. Now that would be the most appropriate, because once you put that hot capping, once you hot cap your attic, you've negated the ventilation system. Like I said earlier, the house is like a chimney. There's a stack effect that creates to move that air in and out of your house for adequate ventilation, and when you hot cap, you negate that ventilating, and the house is going to have to ventilate some way. You're going to notice that moisture is building up and not able to move out of the house. So let's move on to spray foam. So spray foam we're very particular about here in Michigan, and I'm sure as other places are as well, where you spray foam a cavity, a wall cavity, and you want to get, because you're losing energy through the walls more than in the windows, as we saw in that diagram. So on the left, they're blowing blown cellulose into the wall. They're applying blown cellulose. In the right, they're applying spray foam against the exterior brick in that wall cavity. Now there's two types of spray foam. There's closed and open. Closed cell spray foam is almost entirely 99% not reversible. So when it goes on a building material, just know that that's not going to be able to be removed. I mean, yes, you could probably stand there and sand it down, but it won't be able to be removed. So the reason I mention that is that we deal with a lot of demolition in Michigan, and say you would like to repurpose building materials, they cannot be reused. They will end up in a landfill with spray foam on them. We suggest a more environmentally friendly approach, which is blown cellulose. And blown cellulose has been around for some time and is a more natural material. Spray foam is still rather new, and we don't know what its effects are on traditional building materials. So it's a modern material, so we're still somewhat hesitant to recommend that. And in fact, we've received calls where contractors have blown spray foam into a wall and the house has literally been lifted up off of its foundation. So that's, I just wanted to let you know that fact about spray foam. So let's move on. So I mentioned about ventilation being very important when you're dealing with attic conditioning. And so here's a variety of vents that not, some houses have, some buildings have, not everyone has, but I just wanted to give you an idea of the variety that you can have. And soffit vents are to let the air in, and ridge vents let air out. If the roof vents let the soffit air out, then all the air from the roof vents to the ridge could stagnate, heat up, and cause the shingles to fail. So the ridge vent will only work if there's some other air to replace what is leaving. So this is just an idea of different kinds of vents that you can have and incorporate into your home when you're looking at ventilation. A snapshot of attic ventilation here shows where there's a gable vent on the right, and that, yes, that needs to be clean, but you can easily fix the screen in that, and that will serve its purpose to ventilate your attic and get the air in and out of your home, the moisture and the airflow out. And on the left, what you can see is a soffit vent functioning and airflow moving in and out, and cellulose has been blown into the floor of the attic, and this would be a proper way of ventilating your attic. And here's just another example of a proper attic conditioning, ventilation, and insulation. So you have a vapor barrier, you have the attic insulation there, the fiberglass fat, you have the unheated attic space, the roof vent, and you have the roof sheathing, and you have the baffle. So let's talk a little bit about wall cavity insulation. Back in 2010, Michigan received an unprecedented amount of funds from the Stimulus Act for weatherization, and we had a lot of contractors coming into the state to provide weatherization measures here. One of them was wall cavity insulation, and we dealt with a lot of different kind of cases where the contractor did not install the wall insulation properly. So they would go in from the exterior, and as you see from these images, different ways that you can insulate, like underneath the clapboard siding, you can remove a clapboard siding and insulate beneath that. You can go in and insulate from the inside, where is evident on the middle picture. You can go from the exterior and apply insulation through a mortar joint. You want to make certain that you blow insulation. There's a wall cavity between, say, the brick veneer and then where the drywall. Fill a plug with wood putty and sand it and paint it to match. So another area, we talked about the attic, we talked about the wall. Now we can talk about crawl space conditioning. So you want to make certain that you have moisture control, that it's ventilated, air sealing, insulation. Not all crawl spaces have to be insulated, but if you decide that you want to, you want to make certain that where you install and how you install it is very important. It's best to limit the insulation in historic buildings to attics and crawl spaces around pipes and ducts to be the most cost effective. So here what we recommend is that you can use rigid foam board against the concrete masonry here. The concrete block is a method of insulation. And here they've laid down insulation to enclose the entire, to encapsulate the entire crawl space. Another area that we look at is the ridge joist for or the sill plate in a basement conditioning. So you can see in this image where we do not recommend spray foam in the attic or in the wall cavities, but this is an allowable place that you can put spray foam, and that's at the underneath part at your ridge joist or your sill plate. So as you see on the image on the left, the foam expands to fill all the gaps, holes, and joints susceptible to wood movement. The spray foam sticks to the rim joist, eliminating the condensing surface. So that's an allowable area for spray foam. Let me say one more thing. Adding insulation to ductwork in unoccupied spaces is also in a basement acceptable. You can add unfaced insulation to band joists or sill box locations, pipe wrap, hose bib insulation at the exterior wall as well. So here is just, these are a couple measures, or 3 measures I mentioned that we've dealt with here in Michigan, where people have had an energy auditor come and do an energy audit of your home, look at where your air is leaking into your home and exiting out of your home. And actually a professional energy audit comes with a fee, but it gives you the benefit of a building performance expert's experience and recommendations. You want to make certain that you hire an independent auditor, one who doesn't represent a specific product or a system. Professional tools could be a test equipment for air leakage, infrared scans, as this woman in the upper left is going to do a scan. You can see where energy losses are existing, and there's some examples of home performance services that are available, such as in her right-hand corner, a blower door test. And a blower door test is a way to check depressurizing the homes with a large fan and then measuring airflow into the home. The overall air leakage of the entire home can be measured. The test can also be used to determine the location of leaks. So you can also have a duct pressure test to test the location of leaks in your duct system. Now the image at the lower part that shows the home, where you can see the blue is cold air, the red is warm air escaping from the home. That's been done by an infrared camera scan, and that can reveal where walls, ceilings, or floors are inadequately insulated or sealed, and that's helpful as well. So low-cost measures, here's just something we wanted to talk about. I wanted to talk about briefly. Energy efficiency measures. You can get electricity monitors, draft detectors. You can use smart power strips, dual flush toilets. So CFL bulbs, we all are aware of those. Just a couple things that you can do on your own for weatherization purposes. But really identifying those features on the exterior, working from the top of your home to the ground cover to see where you're experiencing energy loss. So, and finally, what I wanted to leave you with is I always refer to this ad from the 80s. They were, this was cool back before green was kind of the buzzword, but it's from the Preservation magazine put out by the National Trust for Historic Preservation. This was their cover, and it says, reusing America's energy. Preservation Week is always in May. Preservation Month is May. But it takes energy to construct a new building. It saves energy to preserve an old one. And so, you know, with that being said, I'm happy to answer any questions that you have right now, anything that I may not have addressed. And I can open it up for questions or response or anything.
Great. Thank you, Jessica. I forgot to mention there at the start that we certainly encourage questions from the attendees. So you should have your question box towards the bottom of the GoToWebinar bar there on the right-hand side of your screen. I'm curious, and specifically while you were doing the weatherization oversight in Michigan, was there, like say for windows, a particular type of weather stripping that you all often recommended? Because there's so many, you know, there's stuff that you can tack on, you can route out part of the sash and insert weather stripping, and there's brass, there's wool, there's vinyl, there's rubber.
We do recommend, there's copper that you can use that is very flexible, and you can manipulate it to, your window sash. And that I've also seen people use rubber, people using wax. One thing, you can wax your windows to make certain that it's moving up and down, and that you can get a nice tight lock when you lock your sash locks, that it gets a firm bringing those sashes together. You can use wax and copper weather stripping. But that's been what we recommend here.
Okay.
But yes, and also, I'm queen of the plastic over the windows during the winter months as well. So, I feel like I'm the doctor that smokes sometimes. I need to work on my own home. If you've ever heard the saying that a person who's in construction, their home's always under construction. Yeah, that's my house. So I'm usually using the plastic wrap, the window kits against my window just during the winter months. But, we recommend interior storms and exterior storms. So that can really cut your energy costs, bring them down.
Mm-hmm. Is there a reason to recommend one over the other, interior versus exterior?
I would say recommend exterior over interior first to start with, because your exterior storms, that's the first layer of defense. When it's storming, when it's snowing, it won't have that weather touching your wood window, which will just accelerate deterioration over time. So we would recommend storms. And I'm certain that the Ohio SHPO office is this way, that, it's not as much as what we're concerned about the material of the storm. It's just that you have a storm on, because those original wood windows, you want to protect those. And so, people say, well, can they be aluminum? Can they be, do they have to always be wood? No, we really just are concerned with getting a storm on there. I guess I shouldn't speak for Ohio. I'm not certain, but I'm sure that they can attest that it's important to have a storm window on your exterior.
Sure. Looks like we have a question, and this is a tough one. The question is, if a homeowner can only afford to do one thing for $100 in the immediate near term, what is the one thing that you would recommend going into the winter season?
That is a good one. Well, a couple things. A few things you could do with that $100. Go up into your attic and see what you have as far as ventilation. Do you have gable vents? Or your vents should be open all year round. So when it's hot out in the summertime, your attic should be hot. When it's cold out, it should be cold. Same temperature as outside. So I would walk into my attic and see if you have your gable vents open, if there's a screen over them to keep birds and other vermin out. You can replace the screen. You can go to a hardware store and get, probably for just a few dollars, get screen cut to fit that vent. So I would do that. The next thing I would do would if you are experiencing air infiltration through your windows, is to get a window kit to get you through the winter time, to get a plastic to put that. And it's actually very, very easy. You can use your hairdryer too to suck out the air to get a better fit. Mm-hmm. to put plastic on your windows. I would take the rest of my $100 and I would go and get weather stripping, which can be plastic, can be some kind of usually it's like a heavier duty plastic to go underneath in my thresholds of my doors, to go around my door, that kind of thing. So small things like that is what I would start with. I don't always go right to the light bulbs. I'm an incandescent light bulb lover. Don't tell anyone I said that. But, I go with the air infiltration. Close your dampers if your fireplace is not being used. Close your dampers on your chimney. I guess when I look at things, I think about what you're doing to your house, is it sustainable in the long run? Everything that we do in weatherization here at the Michigan SHPO is underneath the umbrella of sustainability. Yes, I know that vinyl windows, they're quick, easy, and cheap, but is it sustainable in the long term? no, it's not. So, and also it can be a financial detriment to someone. If you go and replace, we review a lot of housing urban development projects here, and they want to get vinyl windows. Well, they're very expensive and they fail within 10 to 15 years, and so that homeowner is going to have to come up with the money to get another set of vinyl windows. So it's not sustainable even on a financial sense in the long run. So that's a couple of my tidbits. I'd be curious, can other people, I guess they can't speak up, but any other comments or questions that people might have that maybe I overlooked or didn't mention, didn't talk about?
Sure, we can certainly recommend people to chime in with their ideas or about other weatherization type topics. And while we're waiting, I notice on your screen you've changed from your presentation. I see what looks like the backside of a lath and plaster wall.
It is, yeah. So the only thing is that what I'm going to have to do is I didn't include my after photo. I feel terrible about this. So what I can do is I can take an image of the after photo and maybe shoot it to Frank and he can send it out. Is that impossible? Or I see
No.
there's only 16 attendees. So what we did here at SHPO, and I'll show you the video, is we were getting a lot of flack about the spray foam because we weren't recommending it. People were using, we review projects. If it's being funded by federal dollars, we review that project. So if it's funded with private dollars, we don't review it. We don't have a say, or we can't provide guidance. But when it is federally funded, we provide guidance. And we were very skeptical about spray foam, so we wanted to conduct our own test. So what we did was we built this mini wall cavity. We put lath in it and put plaster and actually ran a conduit through it. So we wanted it to be as close to a real wall cavity as possible. We followed the instructions on the can and the can of spray foam, and we did our own test. So what we did was on a Thursday decided, okay, we're going to spray foam this wall, and I'll start it for you. So as you can see, we just followed it, and this is what happens. It's very boring. It's not that exciting, but the end result is extremely exciting. So I'm glad I can keep you on the hook so you can get the after photo. We usually take this wall cavity with us around the state when we travel, and I'm sorry that I'm doing this over webinar, but because I have all sorts of different insulation types that I like to hand out, from blown cellulose to newspaper to blue jeans, different things that people, insulation companies are pushing here in Michigan, just to give you a variety of different insulation types and to not just be using a chemically based product, which is spray foam. Spray foam has a curing process. It says 24 hours it takes to cure, so that's what we did. We looked at it, like I said, on a Thursday. We came back on a Friday, and it was still wet. The spray foam was still wet. It hadn't cured or settled the whole way. And then so we left it over the weekend, and we came back on Monday, and it was drastically different than when we applied the spray foam. And what I'll do is I have that wall cavity in my office. I'll take a picture and send it to Frank, who can send it out to you all. I apologize about that. It slipped my mind to take a photo of that after. I'm always dragging it along with me.
Great. Well, you're going to leave us in suspense on that then.
Exactly. You're on the hook. But any other questions that anyone might have that maybe I didn't hit on, or that you've experienced in Ohio that maybe will be helpful up here?
Yeah, it looks like we do have another question, and the question is, is there one simple to remember federal website to which we should refer folks to for weatherization tips? And I suppose a great website for weatherization tips could be something with the Department of Energy, but is there a different website coming from a different entity that you're aware of, Jessica?
Yeah, we also, the Department of Energy weatherization funds go to the Department of Human Services across most states. So pretty much every county in a state has a certain entity that has weatherization specialists. So, okay, let me take a step back. So the Department of Human Services is located in every state, and then every state, that Department of Human Services has offices throughout that state. So I would Google Department of Human Services Ohio and see what their weatherization policies and procedures are. It could be different than Michigan, but I've found that Human Services and their weatherization, that's a good resource to have on hand, especially if you can look it up by the county you live in. You can see what is offered in your community, what kind of weatherization activities you might be eligible for, or guidelines and tips that are specific to Ohio's climate.
That's a great suggestion. The trust has been good with focusing on the insulated values for things like windows, but yeah, I can't think of a comprehensive weatherization site just off the top of my head.
Yes, they have. The trust has done a lot of green building and green, working with Preservation Green Lab for historic preservation, and with historic preservation and green sustainability, energy efficiency, and they've conducted a lot of different tests. So that might be another website to refer to as Preservation Green Lab. Another thing I just wanted to mention, I think I told you about the climate, is that every building, generations ago I said people built for the climate in which they lived. But often now our building takes place where they flatten, where they just go and clear out a cornfield and they do a sprawl development. And it's not even taking into consideration the environment in which the building is located. But back, generations ago, they thought about, okay, the trees that were surrounding the property that they were going to build on, were they facing the house to the south? They were really taking into account, we call that the microclimate, the area of which the house is located. So think about that when you're doing some of your energy activities. Are you having, your plantings in the southern side of the house? Where is when you're doing your weatherization activities? For instance, some people, I know in warmer climates, they don't want a black roof because it makes their house very hot in the summertime. They want a white or a lighter colored roof. Or if you're in a northern climate, maybe you want a darker roof because you need that sunlight, that warmth, because you live in a northern climate. So those are just some tidbits. Having a porch hanging over, these are all kind of embodied energy that your house might be a bungalow perhaps, or a craftsman where it has a longer eaves that hang out, and that it kind of provides shade for the house, and that make certain that you have your double hung windows. They actually move up and down. A lot of people don't know that windows can move up and down, and that's just to move that air in and out. Heat rises, so if you put your screen across the whole window and you move your windows up and down, then you can have some of that energy moving, or that air moving throughout, ventilating properly throughout your house. So those are just some of the tidbits that we like to consider with weatherization as well. They built smart back then, and we're trying to get on that board now, more sustainable and smarter building.
That certainly makes sense.
Yes, that kind of wraps up my weatherization discussion today, and I'm available to answer any questions. If you have any questions that you think about later on that maybe I addressed or didn't address, I'm happy to field any questions. And Frank has my contact information. I had it on the screen. And I will send Frank the image of the window, the wall cavity after, so you can get a glance of really what happens when you spray foam. You really don't know what you're putting into a wall cavity, so what's going to happen in the end result. So I'd be happy to share that with you all. But this is my contact information here. There's another lady that, my counterpart that works mostly in southeastern Michigan, Molly. She works on weatherization there as well. But this time I'm happy to answer questions.
Well, great. I'll give our folks on the webinar just another moment for any last-minute questions. Otherwise, I'd like to also invite all of our webinar attendees to Kent. I hope you plan on joining us. Our annual conference is coming up in just a couple weeks, and we are very excited about the revitalization and preservation-based sessions that we have coming. We've got some great sessions, some great tours, and even though early registration has expired, it's still a great bargain for the information and the fun that you're going to have if you join us in Kent in just a couple weeks. And while on the subject of webinars, our next webinar is coming up in October. Shoot, I don't think I have that day right in front of me. I think it might be October 8th, but don't hold me to that. But that will be Sandra Hall from Main Street Worcester talking about the board of directors, building a better board. So we're very much looking forward to that. It doesn't look like we have any other questions that have come in. So I'd like to thank Jessica for joining us today, and thank you all for joining us. And so with a little money in your pocket, you have your assignment for weatherizing your house or your commercial building. So best wishes in doing that, and look for the email with the additional information. Otherwise, everyone have a great day. We'll talk to you later.
Thank you.